We're just going to hook you up with the sensors.
In market research facilities like this one in Philadelphia, people are usually asked to put their feelings into words. But on the final presidential debate night, these study participants are letting their bodies do the talking.
Let's just see how my whole body reacts to every word, any kind of thing. So I'm actually really curious how it's going to be.
Several research companies organized this neuropolitical study, breaking people up into 3 groups: Trump, Biden, and undecided voters.
Still undecided, but definitely tonight's an important night.
All the participants are wired up with one of these devices, sensors on the hand, that measures a physiological response. The researchers then can detect an emotional arousal.
You don't have to do anything, you just have to sit here with the sensors on.
The results came in live, as you can see on these moving charts on the screens.
And Biden and Trump voters were reacting to the joking about Trump being Abraham Lincoln or, since Abraham Lincoln, whatever it might be.
Michelle Niedziela with HCO Research is interpreting the data. She says the Trump voters were most reactive, followed closely by the Biden group. But the more muted response from the undecideds tells a different story.
They really don't seem terribly intrigued by either candidate. They didn't seem to have huge reactions. They almost seemed to be kind of sleepy throughout it.
After the candidates finished talking, we asked the participants about how it went.
I'm moving around a lot, making a lot of faces, so I just wonder how that translates.
They took a survey at the end, so their non-conscious feelings can be compared with their written ones.
Yeah, it definitely cleared things up for me, but one issue that I still feel like was not well addressed or executed on each side was the issue of race.
I feel like my decision definitely was made after tonight. Just listening, getting more facts.
And to see if any other minds were actually changed by this debate. In Center City, Drew Smith, NBC 10 News.
Exciting stuff. So I'm joined now by Glenn Kessler, CEO of HCO Research, and Dr. Michelle Niedziela, who you saw in that video, the company's chief neuroscientist. And so, like I said, this is pretty cutting edge stuff. Glenn, tell me, you've been doing this for a little while, but you were doing something else even before this that kind of led you into this. Tell me about the whole impetus of how this came about.
Well, in around 2000, we started doing quantitative communications research, testing television commercials, movie trailers, and so on. And in 2004 and 2008, we took on an internal project and tested every presidential ad in those cycles, every Bush and Kerry ad, every McCain and Obama ad. And we reported them to the media, and we started to get some attention as people who were able to evaluate political advertising. And by chance, a professor at the journalism school of University of Missouri heard one of our media broadcasts and contacted my company and asked me if he could have our data. I asked why, and he said, well, we do psychophysiology. And I said, what's that? And he said, come on out to Missouri and I'll show you. And looked at it, and we ended up incorporating that into our media testing.
Wow. Well, how widely used is this technology now and this approach in politics?
In politics, not very much. In the consumer world, it's very, very popular. In the last 10 years, a number of large consumer companies have started to use different forms of neuroscience or psychological testing. But in the area of politics, the political consultants have been slow to embrace it. But I imagine if one starts to do it, it'll be like the consumer industry. Everyone will have to catch up.
Well, Michelle, it sounds a lot like baseball or basketball now with this advanced metrics applying this to it. Well, tell me tell me a little bit about why you guys are sort of ahead of the game here, and then also kind of what you learned from it.
Sure. I think that we're a little bit ahead of the game and that we're always trying to vet out new technologies. And that's been very advantageous for us. And we really think about new applications of these technologies that have been around for a little while now. Now, as far as this study goes, one thing that was clearest was that each candidate seems to know how to speak to their base. Trump voters had the biggest reactions to President Trump's jabs, and Biden voters had the biggest reactions to former Vice President Biden's responses. The results from the last debate, however, clearly showed that neither were able to get much reaction from the undecided voters. And that's kind of the cool thing about this technology, is that we could really tease apart those sort of emotional reactions where people didn't have to self-report it, things that maybe they wouldn't be able to articulate, we were able to uncover. But also, I think in the first debate, we saw more neuroreactivity with all the arguing and excitement going back and forth with the candidates. And in the last debate, all voters, including the undecideds, reacted fairly strongly to that moment when President Trump really questioned why candidate Biden wasn't able to get things done in the past 47 years. And the interesting thing here in this last debate and with our research was that we were able to show that all the over talking and with all the interruptions from last time in this past debate, when Biden paused to look directly to the screen and to the viewers and voters, and then calmly blame a Republican Congress, in that moment, it was a quiet moment, and it very clearly, effectively was eliciting an emotional response across all voters. And that's kind of really interesting and something that you could really pull out with this sort of technique that you wouldn't be able to get if you ask people to self-report.
Well, Glenn, you talked about how, I've heard you mention that in advertising, you can get a person to say they like something, but you can't get them to
Right.
say exactly what it was about it that they liked. Right?
That's right.
What is
People
yeah.
people will tell you that they like or dislike, let's say, an advertising concept, but they can't tell you why. And so using tools like this, you can look second by second and find out when their psychophysiology changes, which allows you to infer the cause of or what contributed to the liking or disliking. Otherwise, someone looks at a commercial and says, "Oh, it was good." Well, what did you like about it? I don't know. It was good. But we're able to see likely what it was that caused them to have a positive or negative feeling.
So tell me, can we really see that how can we apply this on a grand scale? How can we have fun with this, but also, for all of us, but also then how can it help political campaigns?
Right.
I think, first of all, it doesn't interrupt the experience. And so, as Glenn was saying, that moment by moment measure, you're not going in and interrupting. So when you have something live like this, whether it's looking at, political ads, but also the live speeches that people may be doing, you can see that in the moment response without interrupting and having the person miss something or have them have to think about answering questions or scales. That's really the advantage of this. It's non-conscious. It's a response that we can measure peripherally without interrupting or impeding on anything going on.
A few years ago, we did a study for the blog 538, in which we were measuring gender bias among males and females from Trump, Clinton, and undecided. And we found that the group that had the most gender bias against women were Trump females. And when you think about it, if you were to ask somebody, do you have a bias against a particular ethnicity, race, or gender? They're going to say no. But when you use these tools, you can find out things that you can't find out by asking.
Well, Michelle, just quickly, we're wrapping up soon, but I was just curious, how do you enjoy it? Is this an enjoyable thing to look inside of people's brains?
Absolutely. It's tons of fun. Not only do we get to do fun stuff like, political, but, our day-to-day life at HCD really involves testing all sorts of things, from ad testing to baby shampoo to, food products. So it's always an adventure. And this is really cool stuff. We're cutting edge. We're trying new things and, using our brains to study brains. And that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you guys both, Glenn, Michelle. It's really fun looking inside, and it seems really cutting edge, and maybe people will start using this for better political campaigns.